I want to talk to you about knowledge, the main resource us academics work with, and its ownership. Think about a typical day at work. Which part of it does not depend on knowledge in some way, shape, or form? I think we can agree that our lives as academics are largely shaped by acquiring, producing, and sharing knowledge. So we have it, and we give it away. And this is not limited to the academic world. In fact, our whole modern society seems to be premised on knowledge. Knowledge is the basis of our society, of our culture, and our economy. Your position in this society is based on how much knowledge you have. And we call ourselves experts, professors, or inventors. We indicate our social status by expressing how we own knowledge. And we have devised incredibly complex mechanisms to protect this knowledge. Social mechanisms such as the institutionalization of professorships, the certificates for bakers or master tenors. Other such mechanisms concern law, patents, trademarks, brands, or think about the entire gamut of intellectual property rights that we mobilize in our research, digital commons, open source, or copyright itself. All of these mechanisms suggest that our society values knowledge and doesn't want it to be given away freely. All of these mechanisms therefore express how we own knowledge and profit from owning it. However, all of these mechanisms also have a myriad of harmful effects, and we as academics contribute to these effects, whether we like it or not. Today, I hope to show you how and to convince you that it is worth changing our approach to knowledge ownership. I will give you 3 examples that illustrate how our current systems around the ownership of knowledge are unjust and cause harm. So first, let's take the case of a scientist using and producing open data. Let's say this scientist is using open data and then publishes their research results. The knowledge that was formerly freely available is now no longer freely available. With which I mean that even if it is produced in open access, it's now clearly associated with a person or with a group of researchers. We regulate how knowledge can be reproduced. Or how about cultures that simply do not share our approach to knowledge ownership? When a researcher now goes to this culture and studies it or its regions, they are introducing their knowledge into our knowledge economy by translating it into the right form, a fieldwork, an interview, or a data set. They are making a claim to this knowledge and they are interfering with the social structures that this knowledge is taken from. And you do not even need to go down the cultural route. Compare a carpenter who has deep knowledge of how to build a table with an engineer who is able to translate this knowledge into a patent, thus taking legal ownership of it. Or consider the status of a tenor in relation to a chemist and how their social status allows them to own different kinds of knowledges. And finally, let's take an example that looks deeper into how the translation of information into knowledge concerns knowledge ownership. Let's say you are donating your DNA for some medical research, for instance, for studying hereditary disease. The scientist then takes this DNA and sequences it, translating it into an algorithm and protects it. Now, other researchers who come and want to use this data have to acquire the right to use this data to do their research, for instance, for cancer research or for migration studies. However, the person who has donated the information, your DNA, has nothing to say about this anymore. I believe that the effects described in these examples are all due to the effect that our society has decided that having and owning knowledge can be separated. Whereas the truth is, there can be no separation between knowing and owning knowledge. And if there is, someone is profiting and someone else is losing out. Our system has historical root. It originates from craftspeople who wanted to protect their knowledge. In this system, however, there is a conflict between the interests of the individuals and those of the collective. As an individual, I want to gain value out of my knowledge and protect it. As a society, we want knowledge to be shared and made available. Because of this conflict, many of the mechanisms that supposedly protect knowledge or make it available are actually mechanisms of conditioning how knowledge can be owned for profit-making or status ownership. Think about it. When you publish an article, is this solely about sharing, or isn't it also about showing that you found it first? Or think about the commons, how they make knowledge available for everyone, however, can also disown individuals. Or how about those societies that simply do not have the means or the opportunities to bring knowledge into the right form to own it? The fact is that our society does not value those who know, but those who know in the right way. Let me illustrate this with another example: historical leather production that was typically done in communities of craftspeople. Each person knew one step of the process or a couple of them. They worked together and shared their skills, doing the degreasing, the dehairing, or the soaking of the skin. Each step of the process was necessary to make value out of this knowledge in the form of leather that then was sold on the market. However, there was one point when one step of the process was taken out and protected: the degreasing and the desalting. At this point in time, all further profit-making started to depend on this step. The knowledge that was formerly collectively owned was now fragmented, and every profit-making depended on this step. The practices of oral sharing and collaboration were no longer valued or entirely ignored. And the society was fragmented too and did not cooperate anymore. There are many examples like this in history and in our contemporary society. We need to realize that when we take knowledge and introduce it into our community and knowledge system, we are taking ownership of it. What we are saying is, we very much appreciate your knowledge, but we don't care about the way you own it. And we, as academics, influence the system quite subtly, not only because we translate it into our form, but even more dangerously because we suggest that, like for us, for others too, having and owning knowledge are issues that are necessarily to be separated. Depending on where we take this knowledge from, this can be a form of exploitation, just like you would no longer take a cultural object from a different society and put it into our museums. You should not steal knowledge from other cultures. I'm not saying this to blame or make any of us feel bad about our work. I'm saying this because it concerns each and every one of us. We need to realize that whether we like it or not, we are contributing to these harmful effects with our work. We build the foundations of the knowledge economy, and it is in our responsibility how we use this power. This might sound philosophical, but the effects are real and immediate. I want to change the narrative and stress 2 points. First, that knowledge is a comprehensive category that requires the body and the mind, and sometimes also tools like the knife. It is not only about what we write down or how we abstract things, it's about what we do and what we practice and what we bring into effect, whether this is a mathematical algorithm or tanning the skin. My second point is I also want to reframe the discussion around knowledge property. Specifically, I want us to realize that every time we talk about knowledge, we are simultaneously conditioning how this knowledge can be shared and ultimately also how ownership can be taken of it. And I want us to design new mechanisms of knowledge property that honor cultures and that honor communities that own knowledge in different ways like ours. I want us to recognize and compensate these rightful owners of their knowledge on the basis of their social systems. And I want to find better ways to ask for permission before we take ownership of this knowledge and to explain what is happening and what the consequences of our actions are. This might mean that instead of acknowledging different forms of knowledge and fragmenting what we consider to be knowledge, and instead of making more and more laws and more complicated systems that are increasingly unjust, we need to question our social assumptions about knowledge and its ownership. And we need to rebuild the systems from the ground up. Maybe we should even go as far as asking whether it should be possible to own knowledge at all. But this might be a discussion for another day. While much of this change, in fact, has to happen on a social and on a legal level, I do believe that part of it can also happen on an individual level. Because just like the systems were historically built from the bottom up, we too can rebuild them from here. I hope you will join me in this journey.